Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. I want to answer two questions. The question I get very often is, do I have to start my tomatoes and peppers in small containers and pot up? And the answer to that is no. I'll explain why. And then how do I separate my tomato plants or pepper plants when I'm growing 2, 3, 4 plants in a single cell? I'm going to show you how to use the dry method to separate these and the wet method. All right, let's get started. What size cell to start in really depends on how much room you have under your grow lights and how many plants you're growing. I grow 40, 50, 60 pepper plants, same amount of tomato plants. So I start my stuff in smaller cells, let them grow, then I break them apart, and then I pot them up. Now, the reason that you would do that, first of all, is when your seeds are first germinating, this is your basic standard cell that you find at most of the packs that you buy at stores and stuff like that. The reason that you would start in something like this is because you don't have a lot of room. So the smaller cells allow you to get more plants under the lights. The reason you may start 3 or 4 plants in here is because you'll get 3 or 4 seedlings, and then you can break them apart. When the seeds are first germinating, breaking the surface, that's when they're most dependent on light. That's when you want them under the grow lights for 12, 14 hours for that first 3 weeks after germination. So they get nice and stocky and look like this. Once they get larger, they're not as dependent on the light. You can cut the light down to 10 to 12 hours. You can move some of the flats out of the light for a day or put them in a southern window. You can just kind of move them around. So you have more freedom with larger plants in keeping them under the light. So you may overseed, or you may start in a smaller cell so that you get more of your seedlings, your fresh germinating plants under the lights. You can start in something like this. So this is going to hold a tomato or pepper plant for about 4 weeks for tomatoes, maybe 6 weeks for pepper plants. That's kind of pushing it. In here you might get 6 weeks for tomatoes, 8 weeks for pepper plants. When you go to something like this, I saw these at my seed shop, you can keep your transplants in here the whole time. You don't have to pot up. And this is going to hold a tomato plant for a good 8 to 10 weeks, and maybe a pepper plant 10 to 12 weeks. So you can start in something this large as long as you've got the space under your grow lights. These are still going to want 14 hours of the lights being on when they first break the surface and they grow for 3 weeks. And then you can kind of worry less about that. So the dry method, we're going to pot these up. Here's the separation. So I popped this out. These are actually 4 weeks old, a little bit past their prime. Somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks is when you want to break them apart. You don't want a soaking wet root ball. Somewhere where it's kind of, partially moist, half dry, same thing. And the dry method is really just doing this. You are just breaking up the soil from the roots. And this is great for 4, 5, 6 plants. I've done more. And then you gently break them apart. I like this method. It's quick, it's easy. You don't want these plants sitting around. The roots dry out really quickly, even in the house. So you want to take them to a container. This is their permanent container. You just loosely, fill this with a seed starting mix. Drop in the roots a little bit past where the roots meet the stem. Give this a tap, press it in, and then fill around it. And that's how easy it is to pot up using the dry method. Keep this out of the light from your grow lights for 2 or 3 days. They may be in a little bit of shock. You want to water these in right away, bottom water. If you want to subscribe and follow, I'll show you how I take care of all these plants with fertilizing, with watering, and really how to seed start and grow transplants from start to finish for all kinds of different plants for 2023. So that's potted up. You might want to pot them into just something like this. You're not going to be holding them as long. Where you have colder days and shorter growing seasons, maybe you want to, grow your plants in something bigger indoors and let them get a little bit larger. And there we go. That's just that easy to pot them up like that. All right, now some people prefer using the wet method or using water. And we will pop out the cell here with 4 plants in it. And you just really let this soak in. You don't want this water to be too hot or too cold. It should be room temperature. The roots can get shocked if you're using water that's too hot or water that's too cold. And you're just going to really gently agitate the roots and let the water rinse everything off. And you just keep rinsing them like that. People feel this way, you actually do less damage to the whole root system. The dry method, sometimes people feel like as you're pulling them apart, even though I'm gently tugging them here, when I was doing the dry method, there was more tearing. And these are really tangled. These should have been really taken care of about a week ago. So your tomato transplants, your pepper transplants, when you're potting up, you don't want to let them go too long or they get really tangled. There's a real big root ball in there. So I'm gently smashing that. Keep rinsing. And these should break apart now pretty nicely. And you can see how long the roots are here. Whoop, drop that one. All right, and you would do the same thing. You would just take the next size cell that you want to grow in. Again, the starting mix should be loose. You are just putting in a hole there, dropping in the pepper plant a little bit past where the roots meet the stem, and then you give it a tap. Let it collapse. Press it in a little bit, and then you backfill. And that's all you really need to do. Let's take care of these other three. I don't want them to dry out. So you poke the hole in there, drop in the plant. And this way, what's different is the roots are all collapsed here. When you're doing the dry method, they're kind of spread out more. And when you tap it, the roots are spread out more in the starting mix, in my opinion. I prefer that method. But they're going to survive this way. So you get these standing upright. I'm just going to use the soil that's the starting mix that's on here. And you just sort of backfill. I'm not going to use that little one. Now these guys are in a little bit of shock. You're going to just first of all, put them into a flat bottom water, get moisture into there, and then just let them sit out of the lights for 2 or 3 days. They'll get strong, they'll be fine, and then you just go back to watering and feeding regularly. But that's how easy it is to use the dry method or the wet method to break up the seed ball. And then again, remember, you're starting in the smaller cells for several reasons. One, you don't have a lot of space. You want to get more started. Maybe you don't need a lot of soil, that you'll start your tomato plants and in 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're going to go right out into the ground. It all really depends on what your plan and your goal is. You can start them in kind of these middle sizes. I do sell these at my seed shop along with the large ones. The large ones will hold the plants 8 to 12 weeks. This will hold the plants 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. And you get the idea that you can start in whatever size really meets your needs. The only reason that you would pot up is because you have limited space under your grow lights. You want to start a lot of plants, and then as you pot them up, they're less dependent on the grow lights, so you can kind of move and shovel them around. Thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com and give seed starting a chance. You're going to save a lot of money, and you can grow so many different varieties of plants that you just can't find in those big box stores. Thanks for watching.